Let me get to Douglas Carswell, the president and CEO of Mississippi Center for Public Policy. Good morning, sir. How are you?
Good morning, Paul. How are you?
It is a pleasure. I'm good. We had a great weekend, family we haven't seen for a long time, and we ate a little too much. And
good.
And one of them was a couple of them were from New Mexico and live at an elevation about 7,000 feet, so we had to watch them carefully in the Mississippi heat. Go out and fan them when they decided to walk outside for a while. I want to ask you about the elections over there, but first of all, your take on what is going on. You've been in politics, global politics, for a long time. There are people in the UK and every part of the world worried about what is happening in America. I don't think a lot of people understand how it resonates overseas as it does here.
People around the world, particularly Western countries, very much look at America, and they look to America for leadership. They look to America. America's the country that rescued them from the Soviet Union during the Cold War. People look at America and they look to the United States. But I think something interesting is happening around the Western world, Paul. I think that elections around the world are the story of the two I's, inflation and immigration. Governments around the world that have lost control of both of them, lost control of inflation and lost control of immigration, are being punished by their voters. You see it in France, you see it in Europe, you see it in Britain, and I think you might see it soon in America.
Is England moving, the UK moving more left or right with this election, though?
Well, something really interesting happened. A massive majority for a very left-wing government. And if you stop and look at the headlines, it looks as though Britain has lurched to the left.
Yes.
But here's the interesting thing. The left got 2/3 of all the seats in the British Parliament. 2 out of every 3 are now left-wing seats. But they only got 1/3 of the vote. And you might ask, hang on, what's going on here? How can that be? The story of the UK election is really a story of the Conservatives fragmenting into 2 blocks. The official Conservatives are so monumentally useless. They're so false as Conservatives. They're so sort of Rockefeller Republican type Conservatives that basically half their vote abandoned them. So the Conservative vote split between the official Conservatives and this new insurgent Conservative Party, Reform, which won seats for the first time. And as a result of that, it's let the left in. But I think the real story is not how the left has won the election in the UK. It's how the Conservatives, having promised to be conservative, have failed. They've 14 years of failure. They've been elected and failed to do anything conservative with it. In fact, they've done some pretty left-wing things with it.
Douglas, how do you, if you're trying to give us an example of this, because we're a little confused sometimes on the matter. As a matter of fact, your elections over there don't come up every 4 years or 6 years, or do they?
They're not fixed term. They're not fixed term.
Somebody can call an election at any time?
Yeah, the Prime Minister, or rather the King, formally can call an election. There's a maximum 5-year term, but it's flexible. And it's just a different system. It's not worse, it's not better, it's just different. So it means that when you're elected to Parliament, you've got a maximum 5-year term, but it might be a lot shorter.
It's almost like a recall, automatic recall, isn't it?
Well, yeah. I mean, I served for 12 years in the British Parliament, and I stood for 4 elections, partly because I actually called an election on myself. I called a special election on myself when I changed parties, and I hate these politicians who shift parties and change loyalties without getting the approval of their constituents. So that's what I did. I changed to Nigel Farage's new party, the precursor of the one that's now won 5 seats. Actually, in the same district, I represented the same district that Nigel Farage has just been elected to. And when I changed from the official Conservative Party, which wasn't really conservative, to the proper Conservative Party that hadn't actually got any seats, I called a special election on myself.
So what kind of power does Nigel have going back in now, as far as numbers?
Very small. He's 6 MPs out of 650. But don't be fooled, because he's the authentic voice of Conservative Britain now, he will get a lot of attention, and I think the official Conservative Party has got an existential crisis on its hands. It's full of career politicians who don't really understand the meaning of conservatism. They've failed to deliver conservative policies. Actually, I think there's probably a lesson closer to home for that. If you're a conservative who's elected to office and you fail to actually do conservative things, the real danger is you You end up like British conservatives. Mississippi Republicans don't end up like British conservatives.
So those are your rhino conservatives, basically.
Yeah, and just do-nothing conservatives. Conservatives who think it's okay to be conservative because you, in the case of Mississippi, happen to hunt or have the right bumper stickers, but don't actually deliver things like school choice and tax elimination.
From your allies, from your friends.
Oops, sorry. As a matter of fact, that was a soundbite that was kicked off there. Here goes our leader. And when we were talking about this, I think the world is watching, and they're kind of worried about it. But and at the same time, some of them are probably worried as much about Donald Trump making them pay or putting them in line. I'm not sure. It depends on the country. But here is a couple of sound bites.
From your allies, from your friends and supporters in the Democratic Party, in the House and the Senate, they're concerned you're going to lose the House and the Senate if you stay in. What will you do?
I'm not going to answer that question. It's not going to happen.
What's your plan to turn the campaign around?
You saw it today. How many people do you draw crowds like I drew today? You find me more enthusiastic than today?
Wow. Huh? I don't think you want to play the crowd game. Donald Trump can draw big crowds. There's no question about that.
I can draw a big crowd, but what does he say?
That's embarrassing.
Do you know, it's the first time I think I've actually heard hostile questions to him from the media.
Yes.
And he crumples. Yeah. He's clearly been given a pass for 4 years, probably half his career. And now he's facing tough questions. You suddenly realize, my goodness, is this guy really president of the United States?
Here's a guy asking him questions that's probably one of the most despicable people that's allowed in media. And it aggravates me because there are no consequences for his behavior. But Stephanopoulos, back during the time when all of these women, and they would probably collectively bigger crowds than Joe Biden is drawing, who were molested, allegedly raped, abused by Bill Clinton from the days he was Attorney General in Arkansas to the days he spent 8 years in the White House. And this guy, his job, George Stephanopoulos' job, was to find these women and to do a character assassination. They could be headed to the convent to serve God as a nun, and when he finished with them, they were drug addicts, most people thought, and prostitutes. He did an incredible job just absolutely targeting these people and tearing down their reputation. That was his job. Hillary Clinton was very, very proud of him for what he was doing. One other thing here, and you just mentioned it as far as the media is concerned, it was exposed over the weekend while we were having our barbecued ribs and everything, but there were a couple of reporters who admitted, I think one was in Philadelphia and one was it was Wisconsin and Pennsylvania. I want you to hear that when you come back. And one of the reporters in a local market has already been fired. What they said was, the president, all of the questions, we had to process the questions. They were all fed to us. And
it's crazy.
And it's not good. It's crazy. Absolutely crazy that he's still in there. But I want you to hear the soundbite for yourself. We're with Douglas Carswell, and we'll turn our attention to stateside issues when we come back right after this. One other thing here, President Biden's campaign is no longer going to feed pre-screened questions to media interviewers after a radio host out of the campaign's practice this week, according to the New York Post. This was last week. Radio host Andrea Sanders, who interviewed Biden last week, revealed during the discussion on CNN the president's team provided a list of questions to approve prior to the interview, to which I think, and Douglas Carswell is my guest. Douglas is president and CEO of Mississippi Center for Public Policy. Douglas, whoever writes this stuff and these people who are there working for is, I think, closer to the people who are pulling the strings than to the president himself. Here's the way the interview went down from CNN host Victor Blackwell.
You asked 4 questions, and maybe that's what you were allowed to ask by the campaign or the White House, but they were essentially... questions, both interviews, about accomplishments, progress in your respective state, what's at stake in the election, what he has to say about his debate performance, and what he would say to voters who think their vote doesn't matter or might sit this election out. Were those questions given to you by the White House, or did you have, or the campaign, or did you have to submit questions ahead of this interview?
The questions were sent to me for approval. I approved of them.
Okay, so the White House sent the questions to you ahead of the interview?
Yes.
Okay.
I got several questions, 8 of them, and the 4 that were chosen were the ones that I approved.
Okay. And the reason I ask is not a criticism of either view. It's just that if the White House is trying now to prove the vim, vigor, acuity of the president, I don't know how they do that by sending questions first before the interview so that the president knows what's coming.
This poor lady was fired, but one of the hosts were fired. Probably both will be fired after this. But she felt like she had some modicum of power by him giving her 8, and she could choose 4.
It's extraordinary, isn't it? I mean,
It is.
these liberal broadcasters think of themselves as Woodward and Bernstein. They're not. They're mouthpiece, PL pieces for people with power. It's extraordinary. They've forgotten what it means to be a journalist.